Caius Strider had no idea what was going on. His vision was blurry, his body was shaking, and the only thing he could hear were distant echoes of screams. The dark veil had fallen over the fortress city, like a wave of pure darkness that swallowed everything in its path. The streets, once bustling, were now empty, consumed by a deadly silence. He had no memory of who he was, where he came from, but he could feel something pulsing inside him, a power he couldn't control. Suddenly, a sharp pain cut through his forehead, and a glowing mark appeared on his skin, as if it had been branded there by the air itself. The mark pulsed irregularly, a beat that seemed to respond to something in the environment around him. Caius felt his energy rise, and with it, an uncontrollable force overtook him. He didn't know whether to fear it or to embrace the power surging through him, but one thing was clear: the city was in danger, and he was now a target. He didn't have much time. He knew he was being hunted. The first thing he heard were heavy footsteps approaching, followed by the glow of light blades reflecting in the darkness. The Light Guardians were there, ready to exterminate anyone touched by the darkness. He ran aimlessly, not knowing exactly what to do, but the mark on his skin seemed to guide his movements. He wasn't alone, but he didn't know who could be an ally, who could be an enemy. That's when LSS Renmar appeared, emerging from the shadows with fierce agility, a hunter marked by loss and pain. Her gaze was as intense as the blade she wielded, sharp as her need for revenge. "You're in my way," she said, slicing through one of the enemies trying to get close. "But I won't let you die, not yet." She didn't explain anything else, just pulled Caius into the nearest shelter, a ruined house where the darkness didn't feel quite as suffocating. Elwisis, with her dark eyes and pain-streaked expression, trusted no one, but something about Caius made her hesitate. "What are you?" she asked as the two hid in the silence of the ruin. Caius didn't know the answer. He wanted to know too. But something inside him, an unusual connection with the mark, told him that the truth was closer than he thought. Something was about to be revealed, but until then the only thing he could do was move forward, running from the dark veil that seemed to consume everything around him. With each step, the mark on his body pulsed harder, and a voice, muffled and distant, whispered in his mind, "You don't know who you are, but you're about to find out." But who was speaking? And why did it feel like the whole world already knew him, as if he was destined for something he couldn't even imagine? Time was against them, and Caius felt the pressure rising. The city that had once been his home now seemed like a maze of ruins and monsters, with the dark veil stretching like an ever-growing shadow. He had to understand what the mark meant, and more importantly, how he could use it to fight the destruction coming his way. But as he fled, a constant sense of doubt haunted him. Was he running toward salvation or toward his own ruin? OSS watched him as he tried to make sense of the chaos in his mind. She had lost everything to the dark veil, and the last thing she wanted now was to get involved with someone who might be an even bigger threat. But the connection between them was undeniable, and maybe, just maybe, he was the key to what she was searching for. A way to end the threat that had consumed her life. The wind blew fiercely, and Caius's mark burned, almost as if responding to some distant force. He was being guided by something else. Something he didn't fully understand yet. But he knew his journey was just beginning. The darkness was chasing them, but inside him, something was awakening. Something he couldn't ignore any longer. Caius felt the weight of the journey on his shoulders, but he also knew that each step was bringing him closer to the truth of who he really was. The cold mountain wind cut through his skin as he moved forward, with Elwisis Renmar and Mayrick Valen by his side. The lost city ahead of him looked like a mausoleum of history, buried beneath the sands of time, but it was there that the answers might be hidden. An ancient prophecy written in ruins, like echoes from the past, called his name, the Son of Two Shadows. Caius didn't know what it meant, but he felt that the key to his existence was there, somewhere in the shadows surrounding the city. As they ventured deeper into the buried city, the whispers of something much older seemed to fill the air. The stone walls, covered in moss and cracks, reflected the faint light of their torches. They arrived at the hidden temple, a structure that seemed to defy time, as if it had been built to resist not just ruin but the very essence of oblivion. The inscription on the walls spoke of a power, of a dark energy that Caius was beginning to understand, the Shadow Core. Something inside him responded to the mention of that name, as if he had heard that word before, but he didn't know where. Mayrick, with his tired eyes and serious expression, whispered something about an ancient prophecy, but his words didn't make complete sense. He seemed to hesitate, a silent doubt hanging in the air, like if he knew more than he was letting on. This place, this temple he started, it's not just some ruin. It holds secrets that could either destroy us or save us. The Shadow Core ain't just a force. It's a thing. Like alive. His voice cracked and Caius felt a chill crawl down his spine. Something was off. The energy inside him started bubbling, like a flame ready to burn everything in its path. While checking out the inner caves of the temple, Caius had a vision. It hit hard, super vivid and freaky. He saw a world in ashes, the sky swallowed by this massive darkness. And right in the middle of all that chaos, there he was, standing alone, surrounded by destruction. His body was all marked up by the Shadow Core, twisted into something he didn't even recognize. The vision vanished as fast as it came, but that helpless feeling stuck with him. What the hell does this mean? He asked, trying to calm his racing mind. What am I? LSS had been watching him closely, and she knew something deep inside him had changed. You're not just some weapon, Caius. You're the key. No matter what this prophecy wants you to believe, you've got the power to change all this. To change everything. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He looked at her, searching for some kind of certainty in her voice, but deep down he knew she was right. There was something inside him, something massive. It scared him, and at the same time, it felt like it was tearing him apart. The abyss, it felt closer than ever. But the truth felt like it was slipping further away with every step. All Caius really knew was that he was stuck between two forces. His own nature and whatever fate was trying to shove down his throat. Every piece of the prophecy, every vision, every shadow creeping inside him left him more confused and lost. Who was he really? What did the Shadow Core even want from him? The answers were out there, but they were buried deep. And time wasn't on their side. In one of the temple rooms they found carvings talking about the Son of Two Shadows, but that was it. Nothing else made sense. It was like trying to fit a puzzle piece where it clearly didn't belong. Mayrick stepped up to the wall, eyes scanning the markings. We still don't know everything. We don't even know who we really are until we face it, he said, like he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. But Merrick's words felt more like a warning. Whatever was waiting for them wasn't just some old prophecy. Caius could feel it. The real threat was finally starting to take shape. So what now? The search for answers was just beginning, but the weight of all this doubt and creeping despair was starting to crack his resolve. In a world already hanging by a thread, Caius had to make a choice. Was he going to be the hero people hoped for? Or just the weapon fate had forged? The shadows creeping through his soul weren't staying silent anymore. Caius couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, something way beyond those crumbling stone walls. Every shadow felt like it had a purpose. Every vision, a warning. The carvings on the walls seemed to call out to him, but he wasn't sure he was ready to face what that meant. His mind was a mess, trying to piece together the prophecy and the echoes of what he'd seen and felt. Something deep inside wanted him to be more, something that fed on his fears and doubts. But at the same time he knew the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. And he had to keep moving forward, even if it meant staring straight into the darkness he was terrified of. Mayrick and Alwesess stood in silence, letting the weight of those old words sink in. They could tell something had shifted in Caius, but they couldn't fully grasp what was happening inside him. Truth was, even Caius didn't know. He'd been shaped by something unknown. But what else was he? His soul felt torn in two, a never-ending fight raging inside him. The Shadow Core wanted him, and he didn't know if he could stop it. LSS was the first to speak up. We can't stay here any longer. The prophecy's closing in on us and time's running out. And she wasn't wrong. Something was coming and Caius could feel it in the air. The cold wind picked up, carrying this weird sense of urgency. The lost city wasn't safe anymore. They had to find a way out, fast, before whatever was lurking finally found them. We gotta move, Mayrick said, gripping his sword tight. But Caius didn't budge. He was locked in, staring at the words he just read like something had been triggered inside him. Caius, don't stay behind, Elsis begged, placing a hand on his shoulder. But he was somewhere else, completely out of it. The weight of the prophecy and those visions had his head spinning. Then out of nowhere, the walls of the temple started to rumble, and a crack split open in the rock, revealing a hidden passage. The feeling that the temple was alive? It got stronger. Caius knew, no hesitation, that this was it. That path led to something bigger. something he couldn't outrun anymore. That was where the truth behind his destiny was waiting. But he also knew the road ahead was going to be brutal. Something had been awakened, and now he was about to face not just the secrets of the prophecy, but the kind of darkness no one could control. "Follow me," Caius said, his voice full of that kind of fire you only get when you suddenly realize you've got a purpose again, even in the middle of all this chaos. They moved forward through the tight corridor, swallowed by the darkness as the temple and that lost city faded behind them. The air was thick, like it hadn't been touched in centuries, and every step felt heavier than the last. That creeping feeling like they were being watched or followed never left Caius. He knew fate had landed squarely in his lap. But what else was on the line? Every turn they took, every new hallway that opened up, Caius felt like he was getting closer to something he already knew, something buried deep in his memory. He reached out and touched a cold stone wall, and boom, another vision hit him. But this time, it wasn't just a flicker. It was crystal clear. He saw himself standing in the middle of some massive battle, surrounded by figures of shadow and light, locked in some endless war. And right there, in the dead center of it all, was him. But what was he supposed to be in that mess? A hero? A pawn? Something worse? "You gotta choose, Caius," a voice whispered inside his head, distant but sharp. "You're either the start of something new, or the end of it all. The Shadow Core's waiting." And just like that, the vision vanished, leaving him with more questions than ever. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, not sure whether to jump or run. OSS and Mayrick clearly noticed something had hit him hard, but they didn't say a word. They just kept moving, quiet, but the tension between them was thick as hell. Something was definitely getting closer. And when they finally reached the end of that passage, the truth was just sitting there, waiting. The room ahead was lit with this soft, almost magical glow. In the center was a stone structure covered in ancient markings, symbols Caius instantly recognized from his visions. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just important. It was game-changing. He stepped closer, heart pounding, and reached out to touch those symbols. Whatever was about to happen, he knew it would change everything. From that second on, nothing would ever be the same. The glow filled the room and bounced off the old stone, casting shadows that danced like they had a mind of their own. Caius felt frozen, like this moment, this choice, was about to reshape his entire life. The secret passage was behind him now, but the echoes of their steps and the cold breeze still clung to the air. Everything was silent. Too silent. Like something out there was just waiting. OSS stepped up beside him, hands gripping the blade strapped across her back. "Caius, we need to move. You know what this means, right? You're about to uncover what's left of the secrets we've been chasing all this time." Her voice was urgent, but there was a kind of old fear in there too. She knew how serious this was. Mayrick didn't look so calm anymore either. The guy was on edge, every muscle ready for a fight. The truth could help us, or completely destroy us. "I just hope you know what you're doing," he muttered, staring at the stone like it was a loaded trap. Caius took a deep breath, feeling something stir inside him. Something way bigger than fear. He didn't have a choice anymore. His bloodline, his legacy was tied to this. But what else was lurking in the shadows? That pull toward the Shadow Core was getting stronger, like it was calling out to him from the edge of existence. It felt like the void itself was reaching out, ready to consume everything, but there was something else too. A flicker of light. Hope. Trying to push its way into his heart, fighting back against the darkness. His hands were shaking as he finally touched the stone. The second his fingers hit those carvings, it was like lightning. A crack echoed through the room, followed by a blast of energy that rocked the floor beneath them. The soft glow suddenly exploded into a blinding light, throwing Caius back. His vision blurred, but he could feel something huge waking up. Then came the voice. Not human. Not even close. It was like the walls themselves were speaking, or maybe the darkness behind them. "You've awakened something that should have stayed buried, Caius. That bloodline was sealed for a reason. And now, you've set those forces loose again." The voice echoed inside his mind, shaking something deep, pulling memories out of him like they didn't belong. OSS and Mayrick were on high alert but clearly shook. They saw the light flicker and pull back like a door to another world had opened. But whatever was coming wasn't gonna be easy. The shadows in the room started to stretch and twist, like they had a pulse of their own. Caius, still on the ground, could feel something ancient closing in, something that never should have been disturbed. The Shadow Core was right there, closer than ever. But what he didn't know yet was that something even worse was just starting to wake up. The Shadow Guardians were getting ready to rise. And then the air changed. It got colder. The door to the abyss creaked open, and with it came the promise of total destruction. They noticed it right away. The shadows were moving in sync, like they were getting ready to strike. But Caius couldn't move anymore. He could feel the darkness creeping into his mind, trying to take over. "Don't let it take you," Elwes yelled, sprinting toward him. She knew this was it, the breaking point. Caius had to get up, had to fight whatever was trying to consume him. The power of the dark forces was rising, but Caius's bloodline wasn't weak either. The battle between light and darkness had officially begun, and he was right in the center of it all. With a massive effort, Caius pushed himself up. Power surged through his veins. The Shadow Core was stronger than he ever imagined. But at the same time, the light inside him was flaring up again, trying to break free from the chains of shadow. He couldn't give in. He was the key to the balance, and he couldn't let the darkness win. The sound of Elwes's blades slicing through the air was followed by a distant roar. Something big was coming. The shadows started taking shape, turning into ghostly figures made of pure darkness, their eyes glowing deep red. These weren't just any monsters. They were Shadow Core beasts, stronger and way more dangerous than before. "Kill!" Mayrick shouted, snapping him out of it. Caius looked into his friend's eyes and saw exactly what he needed to do. He had a choice to make. Either let the darkness take over or dig deep, pull from his bloodline, and fight for everything he stood for. The fate of it all was in his hands. The room felt like it was stretching and shrinking with every clash between the two forces. The Shadow Core creatures rushed in faster than the eye could follow, moving like shadows but hitting hard enough to make the floor shake. Caius's heart was pounding like crazy while the Shadow Core power surged inside him. It was like the darkness itself was trying to swallow him whole, messing with his head and shaking his confidence. But he couldn't fold. Not now. Elwes was a blur, tearing through the air with her blades, dropping shadow beasts one after another. Every hit landed like it was slicing right into the darkness itself, but she knew the fight was far from over. The real challenge wasn't just beating them, it was cutting off their connection to the Shadow Core. Each one of those creatures was a living piece of that evil force, feeding off the shadows. Mayrick, holding his own like a pro, had his eyes locked on Caius the whole time. He knew this wasn't his fight to finish. Caius had to find that power inside him, use the legacy he carried to end this. "Caius, you're the one who has to finish this," he shouted, landing a clean hit on one of the shadows charging at Elwes. Caius felt the pressure building. Whatever was pulling at him was bigger than anything he'd ever faced, wild, uncontrollable. But then, right in the middle of the chaos, a vision hit him. That same voice from the cave, the voice of the stones, whispered again in his mind, "The legacy isn't a burden, Caius. It's a gift." That's all he needed to hear. He wasn't just another fighter. He was the bearer of an ancient power, the one meant to bring balance between light and dark. He wasn't a slave to the Shadow Core. He was its guardian. Energy burst from within Caius, a surge of light blasting outward and wiping out the shadows around him. He raised his hands high, channeling the power of his lineage. A golden, radiant flame lit up the whole room. The creatures that once seemed unstoppable started breaking apart like smoke in the wind. Caius was finally understanding what it meant to be the balance, to be the last of his bloodline. He didn't have to fight the darkness. He had to embrace it as part of his power, not his enemy. But the Shadow Core wasn't going down that easy. As Caius's light spread, a figure took shape inside the darkness, rising from the pit of that twisted power. It was tall, cloaked in what looked like liquid shadow. Its eyes glowed red, and its voice echoed through the air like a nightmare. "You don't understand, Caius. You never will." This was the leader of the Shadow Core forces, an ancient being that existed just to wipe out Caius's bloodline. This thing wasn't some random monster. It was born from the dark itself, a guardian of the void. That's when the battle changed completely. Caius knew this fight was going to be brutal. He wasn't just up against a creature. He was facing evil in its purest form. Its presence was overwhelming, like it was sucking all the light out of the air. But Caius didn't back down. He had something that thing could never have, the legacy of the Guardians. Caius stepped forward, eyes locked on the creature. His mind was sharp now, and his connection to his bloodline felt unbreakable. He called on the ancient energy, a force flowing through him like a river. The golden flames of his lineage flared brighter, forming a blade of pure light that he swung it with devastating power. The moment he lifted it, the energy made the ground itself shake. The Shadow Core creature let out this low, creepy laugh, but Caius didn't flinch. Deep down he knew this was his fight. His battle. He was the last of the Guardian bloodline, and that strength wasn't around him, it was in him. With a sharp and precise move, Caius hurled the light blade straight at the leader of the Shadow Core forces. The blast hit dead on, erupting in a flash of light that lit up the whole room, burning away the darkness like it never existed. The leader's form twisted in agony, falling apart like dust in the wind. But even defeated, the Shadow Core's presence still lingered in the air, like a reminder that evil never truly disappears. Caius knew this battle was won, but the war? That was far from over. LSS and Mayrick ran up to him, their faces showing relief, but also something deeper. They got it. They knew Caius's path was only getting started. That power he just unleashed? It was only a taste of what he still had to learn to control. But for now they had this win. The Shadow Core was down, and for one brief moment, balance was restored. Caius looked at his friends, feeling the weight of everything on his shoulders, but also a spark of hope. The Guardian legacy wasn't lost. He'd found his place in it. But darkness wasn't gonna quit, and he'd have to get stronger for every battle ahead. They might have won this round, but fate was still dealing cards. With the room now quiet, glowing with Caius's light, the three of them walked away, knowing deep down the journey was just getting started. The bloodline lived on. And with it, the hope for a balanced world. The victory over the Shadow Core? It was just a break in the storm, a pause in a journey that would keep pushing Caius, LSS, and Mayrick to their limits. Yeah, they'd faced the darkness, but the forces trying to corrupt the world? Still out there, lurking in the shadows, just waiting for their next shot. That battle Caius just fought showed the real depth of his power, but also how far he still had to go to keep the light in the dark in check. That legacy he carried? It wasn't just some old title. It was a responsibility, a power that could reshape the fate of everything. As they walked down that path together, more aware of their roles than ever, one thing was clear: they weren't just fighters in some random war. They were the last line of defense between the world and these ancient powers always clawing their way back from the void. Every win didn't mean evil was gone, it meant hope was still hanging on. And Caius, with that unshakable link to the legacy, knew the road ahead wasn't gonna be easy. The sacrifices, the brutal choices, the people he'd lose, it was all part of the cost to protect the future. But he wasn't walking it alone. LSS and Mayrick were right there with him, just as committed to holding the balance as he was. Their bond, forged through chaos and fire, was stronger than anything the dark could throw at them. They knew every step forward brought them closer to healing the world that had been shattered. And as Caius's story kept unfolding, the truth behind the Guardian legacy started spreading. Their fight, filled with pain and sacrifice, kept lighting a fire in those who heard it. People who knew that real strength wasn't about brute force. It was about the guts to do what's right even when it hurts like hell. Destiny was in their hands, sure, but what really mattered were the choices they made every single day. And this wasn't the end. 'Cause the cycle of darkness and light? It never really ends. The fight goes on. And the legacy of Caius, and everyone standing with him, won't be forgotten. Because as long as hope's still alive, someone out there will always rise up to fight for the future. If you felt this story hit you deep, don't forget to drop a comment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of our next adventures. Catch you in the next one.